Tyrannicide 1. Mara's death began in this mark. Later would come Eris Morn, Osiris, Toland, and all other accessories of the majestic suicide. Later would come the Reef's tentative entanglements with Vex and Cabal, Fallen and Hive, and the fateful decision to intervene when the House of Wolves turned earthward to conquer the last human city. Later, there would be stories here untold, the Ahamkara and the subcreation of the Dreaming City, the Shatterstone fury of the Reef Wars, Brother Uldren's journey into that fell garden, and great sweeping plots whose beginning and consequences have been entirely expunged for the sake of elegance, or as of the Route 81, redacted for the sake of secrets yet untold. Here is where the beginning began. At that moment, when Mara bolted awake from the dream, her circle of Techeuns lay with her in misty winter-cold chamber, and they came back groggily, their augments stuttering with resync. She had dreamt a thought of absolute simplicity and perfection, and the thought had become a tooth and bitten her. It had left a wound-like shape. Mara seized a pane of crystal paper, flashed it rigid and receptive with a touch, and wrote, "I dreamt of sword and balm. I dreamt of the self-honing blade that has cut itself so fine. It pierces the world and thus becomes the world. It is self-honing because it constantly whets itself against itself. I dreamt of death bearing this blade, or something so closely allied with death as to be its synonym, so that to separate them would require a knife sharper than sharpness. Death raised up that blade and said, 'I cut all, and all I cut. Ayat.' Then death cut the bomb, and the bomb was broken and could not fire. I was in the bomb. I knew that death was the cut verb, and that its only verb was to cut. Shapes and gliders. I dreamt of existence as a game of cellular automa. In this metaphor, there were only two things, shapes in the game world and the rules of the game world. The rules were the rules of life and death. I understood that the sword was the desire to escape existence as a shape in the game and to become the rule that made the shapes. This rule said only live or die. It had no other outputs. It could not keep secrets. Against it was the desire to become a shape so complex that it could within itself play other games. What will soon be? I dreamt that the sword was the death and rule sought out complexity and cut it to reveal the simplicity within. I knew that soon we would be cut, for we were complex and full of secrets. I knew that it was coming. I knew that the stroke would fall and I had to stop it. How can a bomb make use of a sword? How can the rule that separates life from death be killed? I must go to the Dreaming City and use the Oracle Engine, Mara told her Techeuns. Prepare my ship. Tyrannicide 2. 10 times and once more Mara asked the Oracle Engine to show her the sword that was the death and the way it would appear. 10 times and once more the Oracle Engine showed Mara an image of her family. First it showed her Shur Ido, laughing and bright with strength, who would receive and later return. Then it showed her Uldren, her brother who explored the ruins of fallen worlds and sought out challenges to test himself. Then it showed Mara, her own face, and lingered on the secret brightness of her eyes. Last of all, leaving Mara imperious with disdain towards her own feelings, curtly aloof toward all who asked her what troubled her, it showed her Ursana, who remained behind. Mara dwelt on this puzzle. A mother who had remained behind, a sister with secrets, a brother who hunted and explored, a woman who was plain and fierce. She understood then that the answer to her question lay within herself, and that to defeat what was coming, she would need a perfect understanding of herself. Isolation would be her watchword, for an isolated system is the easiest of all to understand. First of all, Mara went into the gardens and planted a flower for her mother, who she thought must still live, though she might by now have forgotten her first daughter and her first son. "Mother," she said, "I asked to be your sister rather than your daughter, and so I denied you the chance to tell me your secret, the mother truth that is mapped in the negative space defined by the lies mothers tell their daughters. Well, here are my secrets. I love you. I've always loved you. Without you, I never could have been anything at all." Then she went to speak with her brother. But Aldrin was away on Mars, and she found only his empty chambers, the half-sharpened knives and racks of pistols. She knelt in grief and touched her hand to the floor where his pacing boots had scuffed the asteroid's smooth stone. This was the shape of their siblinghood now, the pursuit of absences. Last of all, Mara went to Shur Ido. Shur was making a list of incredibly stupid and fatal tasks to post on the Guardian bounty wall. "I want to tell you the truth," Mara said. "Ask me a question. If you take any positive integer and halve it, it is even, but triple it and add one, it is odd, and you repeat this process forever, will you always eventually reach 1? Shur Ido demanded. "Sure, my faithful wraith," Mara said. "Please take my openness seriously, though I'm sure Ilian could answer your math problem." "Okay," Shur looked at her curiously. "Then here is my question. What's gotten into you? Why are you acting like this?" "Can we walk?" Mara asked. Tyrannicide 3. Mara and Shur Ido go out into space and kick off the hull, wearing Kosar skin-pressured suits and slim tethers. The stars circle them like hard-focused candles, like the diadems of a trillion dancers. Shur Ido pulls herself close and touches helmets with Mara. "We're alone. What's happened, Mara? You've always been, private," Mara suggests. "Mysterious and reclusive, I was going to say." "A sword can be part of a bomb if the sword strike is the detonation mechanism," Mara says. "It's impossible for a cellular autonoma game to change its own rules, but it is possible to create subgames with their own rules, and for those subgames to yield advantage to the master game." "That's cool," Shur says. "You know, when you talk like that, what you're actually saying is, I don't want anyone to understand me, but I want them to understand they don't understand me." "Yeah," Mara admits, and then, hoarsely, she makes herself say, "Sure, I have the secret. This thing I did, and I don't know if anyone can know it without hating me forever." "I had a secret too," Shur reminded her. "The thing I did. It's nothing compared to mine. Nothing at all. Having had some long experience hating you, and then having given it up, I think it would be hard for me to go back." Shur's strong hand settles on the small of Mara's back. They twirl on upward, rotating around a point between them, their 1,000-kilometer tethers slowly unfurling. "Do you want to tell me?" "No," Mara says, "but I think I have to." "Okay, Your Majesty. What did you do that made Elise Lee throw back blackberry tea in your face?" "I was first," Mara says, and she explained the missing half, the first half of the sentence. "I made the rules and initial conditions that deceived her into believing she herself had decided. It ends like that, where the rest picks up." Shur Ido looks at her in expressionless silence. Shur Ido's hands stroke the same between Mara's skin suit and the glassy petals of her helmet. Long ago, this woman betrayed her oath and went to serve the Diastrum, a woman who cried out in anguish at the curse of physicality and the possibility of suffering. Long ago, this woman threw away her whole life to punish the highest crime she could imagine, the denial of transcendent divinity to those who might have claimed it. "You're the devil," Shur says. "You're the lone power who made death. You allowed possibility of evil. You might be responsible for more preventable suffering than anything that has ever existed." Mara cannot shake her head or even nod. "Well, Shur says. If you hadn't, none of us would be here. I guess I don't see what else you could have done. If you cared about those we left behind. If you wanted us to be able to go back and help in the fight, she leans forward and very gently kisses the inside of her helmet, where it meets Mara's. In her mind, in that place that is bound to all Awoken, Mara feels the touch of gentle lips. Shur looks suddenly sly. You know, Mara, I don't think you confessed anything at all. Unless it were a way of keeping a deeper secret, what's really going on? There are many ways to godhood, Mara tells her. The belt of Orion glitters on her helmet, like a 3-star rating left by some hive entity Shur once killed. One way is to kill all that is killable, so that all remains must be immortal. Another is the road I have walked, mostly by accident. One of these ways is closer to the sword, one is closer to the bomb. If the bomb can defeat the sword by the standard of the sword, then the bomb has claim to primacy. Never mind, Shur sighs. Seen anything cool on the Crow's surveillance lately? Tyrannicide 4. Later. Much later. It is the night before the Day of Screams. Mara meditates cross-legged in a cradle of null gravity. Varix has told her more than once how the Fallen speak of the Awoken as sterile, unable to regrow their flesh, cursed to bear their scars forever. Also how they think of the Awoken as self-twinned, coexisting with their own shadows. Didn't ancient Inanna, Queen of Heaven, descend into the underworld to confront her shadow twin, Sister Ereshkigal? Inanna was judged full of hubris and executed. You cannot defeat a thing that is synonymous with death except in its own territory. You cannot fear and flee from death. You must face it. Death is a sword, and a sword is like a crossing point, like a bridge, and a bridge may be walked 2 ways. The plan exists in her mind alone, although beloved Eris has by necessity learned most of it. The Techeuns do not know the whole plan, although they will position the harbingers upon the threshold. Even sweet, capable Petra does not know the whole plan. So many she will leave behind. Aldrin knows nothing of the whole plan. He has kept more and more to himself, building up secrets and schemes. All Mara knows and pities because he needs Mara, and he thinks he can get her attention by keeping secrets from her. Secrets are her virtue, and the virtue of her nemesis, the being whose existence she deduced from the analogy of family the Oracle engine showed her. Mara will begin the end of that queen's brother today. She knows what that means for the fate of her own, an eye for an eye. She must think now of the fate of entire cosmos, and of her tender, half-assembled answer to the cold sword logic of the Hive. She must not grieve. She must not fear. Was Inanna afraid when she descended? Mara's not going to be outclassed by some ancient fable. After all, Mara's name is Death. But there is one thing she admires most about Inanna over all other myths of Catabasis. Inanna went to conquer. Tyrannicide 5. She closes her eyes. Oryx's throne world smashes through her feet, the bubble of averted scream space pulverizing rock, metal, and flesh as mere matter surrenders to the will-made fact of the taken king. Somewhere, Aldrin roars defiance. This is the moment of absolute sacrifice, the incarnation of Awoken doom, to give up their lives in defense of the world they once abandoned. The sense of the great dying rips at Mara like a sob. She feels her Techeuns prepare emergency self-gates. Shuro-chi reaches out to her, a wordless urgent need for Mara to live, and it takes all the cold and passive remove of Mara's millennia to turn that hand away. The shockwave strikes. Mara dies. In one way, she is vaporized with her catch. the bonds between the very particles of her body questioned by the harrowing logic of Oryx's weapon and found inessential. The mechanism of devastation is spontaneous fission. The author of the devastation is laughing in joy. In another way, a more true and symbolic way, she is impaled on Oryx's blade. She has thrown all of her might at him, and he has answered. He has snuffed her fledgling divinity and her meager claim to royalty. He has exposed Mara to the raw and caustic hostility of this high war. She has been defeated by the sword logic. She dances down the blade and steps into his throne world. The harbingers give her the gate, and she takes the step. She is dead, consumed by Oryx. She is dead in his will, his ascendant realm. There was no other way inside except this true way. And Nana at least gave her people some warning. She told her minister to have her worshippers lament, drum, pray, lacerate their buttocks, and Nana told her minister to beg to the gods to save her. Mara has not. Instead, she has enlisted Eris and several million mad dancing guardians to go knock off the god who killed her. It is, on that level, a very simple bank heist. Get yourself taken into the treasury as treasure, and when the owner dies, break back out with his stuff. But even Inanna had to send everyone away before she passed through the last door. Mara thinks of everyone she has ever known, all the people she had lost, even back to Yang Liwei and the ray of light in the deepest darkness. She is there again, on a tether, falling into mystery. Her brother is crying out after her, trying to follow, and she cannot look back. She has been thinking of a logic of her own, of secrets and hidden designs. The universe has not grown simpler in its age. Whenever life can begin, it has begun, and even in some places where sensible folk expect it should not. The great tendency has been towards intricacy, towards sophistication, towards deep thought and richer ways of being. A sword is everywhere edged, but the pieces of a bomb do not look at all like weapons until they are assembled. Oryx's throne world tries to tear her body and psyche into quintillion screaming pieces, but Mara has survived the inchoate primordial chaos before space and time. She has retained her selfhood through far worse than this, and she has patience for eons. Eris will succeed. The Guardians will play their part. When the power in this world is free for the taking, Mara will take it, not as the victor taking spoils, but as a scavenger taking a prize component for her masterwork. When a pawn reaches the far side of the chessboard, it may be promoted to a queen. And what hatches when you promote a queen? What new board does she claim her prize on? Mara knows. She settles in for the long wait, entirely alone, almost at peace with it. Regent. I see. And our wolf ships? All destroyed but the Calyx Sin, and she is badly wounded, burning for Pallas now. Galiots? Those that remained at the outpost are still in good condition for now, and we still have some reserve at Pallas. How many? 12. And how many shipwrights? I'm afraid I cannot say. I see. Divert Halam to civilian defense. Send Kamala and anyone we can spare for a covert SAR run. Avoid hostile engagement at all cost. If they find survivors, notify me immediately. Wilco that. Signing off, Commander. The comm light goes off and Petra takes a deep breath for calm. She leans forward to flip switches, adjust dials. Her hands are shaking. Commander. She was never supposed to be Commander. All she ever wanted was to serve and protect Mara, and now Marosov was alive. She was alive somewhere, she promised. Retaking the yoke of her own galliot, Petra sets a course for the tangled shore. She cycles through calm channels as she flies. The hive are swarming the outpost, and the disciples are demanding escort in their evac. Debbie is MIA, Guardian jumpship after Guardian jumpship is throwing itself kamikaze at that monstrous hive ship, only to be repelled by some kind of defensive shield. 100 Cedars are landing on Ceres. Halam is evacuating every civilian he can to the shielded inner cities. 200 more Cedars on Palace. Skyburner forces inbound, armed to the teeth. Wolf allies defecting. Devi is found. Petra cannot turn off the radio. She cannot stop listening. She can scarcely breathe. She wanted to reverse course and fly her ship into the eye of that flagship. She wants to wreck herself against its ugly scrimshawed hull and scream so clear and true as she dies that the wretched beast will hear her and know what atrocity he has committed. She wants to believe Mara's alive, but how? How? How when she cannot feel her, when she does not know every step of this accursed plan? She approaches Thieves' Landing from a reckless angle, then cuts fast and low across the lashed-together wreckage of the shore. The air is thick with dust and debris and shimmering immaterial harbinger matter. It is impossible to see more than a kick-out. She follows her radar. Unconsciously, she holds her breath. And then, there it is, the watchtower. Petra sighs through clenched teeth. It's whole, unharmed. Ilan. In the bomb-walled passages of the palace called Processes and Services, the screams have stopped. I've never heard it quiet before, Lissel whispers. Are they gone? But she knows, as Portia and Nassia know, as Ilan herself knows, that the Taken have not gone. Not very long ago, Processes and Services was the place Ilan and her sisters came to make the desolate items of technology imbued with the husk-dry power of Oryx's Taken. Ilan was the first to stand as a living conduit, the first of the Techians to use that deep interior fault line, that fundamental Awoken schism as a bridge. She remembers the endless, awful, infinitely malicious screams of the thing. But she also remembers the whispers, and if the screams are silent now, the whispers are louder than ever. "Quickly!" Ilan hisses, before Petra is informed. Any breach of the Processes and Services triggers an alert. And while they were crafty in their intrusion, even minute body heat and motion of the air will be detected. We must ask our questions and go. Brave Portia leads them to the cell she selected for their use. A vacuum gape sphere of relic iron coated inside and out by signal-deadening spinfoil. It hovers in suspension, a black miniature traveler, a pearl formed around a hideous interior flaw. Ilan opens a needle-thin access port. The stink of ozone rolls out. There is a Taken vandal within, flexing and shuddering through nameless permutations of blissful agony. "Nassia," she whispers. Quiet, precise Nassia slips a whisker of cable into the port, guiding it through impossible twists and encrypted locks with the caress of her augmented fields. Ilan rubs her temples. The whispers are loud here. The whispers that haunt the place where the Queen's voice once sounded. Whispers which sound so much like the missing Shuro-Chi and the others from the Queen's flagship. They should have self-gated to the Dreaming City if the battle went wrong. They should have come home safe. What if they needed help? What if Petra has kept their fate from Ilan? Would she do that? Petra Coven's daughter, raised by the witches? Things have not been easy between the Regent Commander and the Techians. Ready, Nassia offers the splayed end of the cable to them. Be careful, all of you. Their augments sink in a stutter of light. Like a sunbeam passing over a field of diamonds, inquisitive Lissel forms the first question. Do you hear us? The viper-strike rush of the Taken Thing's will comes at them. It's powerful, but familiar. Ilan deflects its demand. I think it hears us, she says with a grim chuckle. We know Taken too well, don't we? There were fears once that the Guardians would be appalled by the Taken-empowered armor, but Petra was right. Guardians will wear anything that gives them power, whether tactical or social. Together they unfold the Taken Thing's brutally elegant interior geometries, seeking the threads of connection that reach out across space and time. Shuro? Ellen whispers. We have heard you. Do you hear us? And that is when she makes the fatal mistake. She thinks of the time before Saturn. She thinks of Shuro Chi and Uldren and Mara. She wants that time back. She wants. In the non-space around them, great jaws snap shut. Riven! Bray Portia screams. Ellen was prepared for Taken. Folded perfect things, elegant and thus manageable. But this absolute appetite, this impossible will. She speaks the secret word of stasis that will crash their augments in the communion. She does not know if she is in time. Quiet Nasia is screaming. Inquisitive Lissel is screaming. The screaming has begun again.
Do not fear, brother. This was the only choice I had. The sound of her voice ripped him from sleep. He jumped up. His ship was still contained in its protective sphere. He tried to retract the shield, but it was locked to its initiation time. He couldn't remember activating it. Then, he remembered the battle. The blast. What that ship fired was ancient, not bound to anything the origin libraries even sought to describe. He tried to calm down. He thought of her, searching for her pull. He couldn't find it, but he was not calm. She always told him she would always be there behind the calm. All he could hear were echoes of that sound. It began as soon as they hit the ring plane, ringing in the old glimmer of his long-buried self, before she showed him who he was, in the before and the after. The Tekkens should have known what the Dreadnought could do. Must have known. Did they not feel what he felt? Hear what he heard? And that damn catch, it wasn't protected. They had to know that. All to deploy the Harbingers. They barely got a foothold before the weapon was fired. He thought of Petra and how overwhelmed she must be, forced to hold her post and watch her people perish. He tried to calm himself again, forcing long breaths. He realized where he was. Mars, Athabasca, the Kandor Isles. He hadn't been here in so long. Not since he found the Black Garden. The countdown to the shield's deactivation pulsed. He tried again to home in on her, to find if she truly gave herself for this battle. He felt close to something, a hum of starlight. Then, shield deactivation broke his focus. He climbed out and saw the damage to his ship, and the truths of the Armada's devastation sunk in. He turned in despair to find hundreds of his crow drones deployed on Mars long ago, circling his ship, waiting. "Welcome back, Master." One of the closest to him spoke first, and the others followed. A wave of salutations echoed throughout the dry sea. And with that, hope returned. "Begin repairs on the ship immediately. Something has gone missing, and you will help me find it." She is gone. He lives now in a state of perpetual dread. He hates the future because he fears it. He fears its emptiness, and he cannot imagine lonely eternity without her. As he staggers down the edge of a Martian chasm, he can feel the drop calling to him, begging him to join her, to end it all. The heat of the place soaks him in sweat. The dead chassis of one of his old crow drones slung over his back feels like it's compressing his ribs, pushing his lungs up against his sternum, expelling his breath. He needs the drone to fix his ship again. He must get off Mars. He must start looking for her. The weight of the crow drone slams him down on hands and knees. His vision swims. Stars and shining harbingers soaring through the ring plane and a wall of terrible light. And he sees the moment the Dreadnought took everything from him. The moment his sister finally, absolutely, utterly, ran out of secret plans. That instant when all sound ceased and he screamed denial, and yet, in spite of his soul's plea to die with her, reached for the deflection shield that saved his life. He crawls until he can rest in the shadow of a dead Vex block. He crashed in the Candor Isles, not so far from the gate to the garden, the place where he saw another path for the Awoken. Why had Mara never accepted his invitation? He has been hearing her. Thirst hallucinations, surely. But there is that hum, that whisper, that thrill of starlight in his skull. A flock of his crow drones found his crash site and repaired his fighter. He made it halfway to orbital velocity before a Cabal gun clawed him out of the sky and sent him crashing down in Hellas Basin. Now his crows are dead, and the fighter is probably beyond repair. And his sister is gone. His sister is gone. And he followed her, and all his people followed her because he and they were sure she had a plan. She always had a plan. Something better than dying by the thousands for a city that does not care. He should go home. He should go home. If he can find a way. But will he have the strength? He cannot be the champion they loved. He cannot restore their faith in the purpose of the Awoken or in his sister's design. He no longer believes. This world is a carcass now. The scars of the Guardian's passage, Cabal fortresses reeking of decay, littered with flesh and bone and broken armor, the shattered chassis of Vex littering the sands. A place of death, death and war, a war that tilts on the fulcrum of the Traveler, brought upon by the puppets of that Traveler, that fulcrum of war. There is something in his eye. He blinks and blinks, trying to rub it away. And as he does, he struggles to hear her, to sense that prickle of starlight under his skin. She will tell him he is on the right path. She will tell him she's still alive. He feels nothing. He let his captors drag him through the dirt. His arms ached. 2 hands wrapped around each bicep like iron bands. He slumped, and the toes of his scuffed boots bumped over the stones and left trails in the dust. He kept his eyes low, a ragged and stained cloak hanging over his face. It was not a position to which he was accustomed. They debased him. They abused him. He bit the inside of his cheek until the blood filled his mouth. He struggled not to resist. They needed to believe he was broken, that he wasn't a threat. It was the only way they would bring him before their Kel. He'd spent weeks weaving the illusion that led the Fallen to him. He'd left bits of his trail where they couldn't help but find them. He skulked from planet to planet, Mars, then Venus, then Mercury, then back again, following rumors and whispers. He'd hid from the Guardians, from his own people. He'd let everything they had built fall apart, while those still loyal to him searched every inch of this forsaken system. Now it was time to stop searching and start building. He would need soldiers who answered to him and no one else. Bodies to shape with will and magic and tech to his needs. These would serve. He thought they would take him to a catch, but they were deep underground. Not near the Cosmodrome, but it didn't matter. He'd never been particularly concerned with the geography of this blasted world. It was not his home. So he bent his head low and listened to the guttural string of hisses and clicks issuing from the maw of a would-be king in yellow, a broken ruler of a broken house, and the last of his kind. They were more alike than he cared to admit. When the creature's anger had burnt itself out, he raised his head to look at it. He did not need to speak. One Kel rises, and another bends the knee. And the prince felt the little hum of starlight ripple through him, the one that let him know she would be pleased with what he had done. When at last they drag him before the Kel, he has already been transformed by weeks of abuse, weeks of beatings and forced runs and animal pen conditions, into a happy man. The mighty Kell of Kings tells him, clearly but not concisely, what it thinks of him. Prince Aldrin of a ruined house, lesser of two siblings, bested by Skolas, blinded by Varix, lesser than Dreg, squanderer of fleets, last of the Awoken nobility, last of his kind. When Aldrin looks up at him, he does not even need to speak the truth. The Kell of Kings has named Aldrin, and in doing so, it has named itself. The broken ruler of a broken house. The last Kell. You can do what I cannot, the Kell tells Aldrin. You, broken, beaten thing. You have no pride, so you will lose nothing when you give the word that must be given. It is twilight for the fallen, and we must lay our banners down. And to the groaned and growled protests of its court, the Kell of Kings kneels to Aldrin. I bow to thee, it says, for in thy downfall and disgrace thou bearest the weakness we cannot. Thou shalt tell the Elixni to tear off their banners. Thou shalt tell them that we must all surrender to each other. We must give up our rivalries, or we will not survive. Wilt thou do this for one dying people, prince of another? He will do it. He will gain soldiers and ships and resources to begin the search. He found them, he himself, by risking everything and surviving, as he always does. He feels her in his heart. She is still out there. She needs him more than ever. In the pit of his suffering, her voice came clearly to him, like the way she once appeared to him while he was being beaten to a pulp in a zero-G brawl. She is out there, waiting for him, and everything will be all right. He will be there for her. It will be all right.